Good afternoon. Today we're going to do a yoga practice, just a very traditional structured class, starting with some groundwork, warming up, and we'll move to standing poses, incorporating some balancing, and then move it back down to the ground again. Of course, traditionally we might start with sun salutations from the standing posture, but we can also start by warming up while on the ground as well. So we can find ourselves on a mat if that's what we're using. And come to the seated posture. We can have our hips resting on our ankles, or we could sit more comfortably in a cross-legged position. Let's take a few moments to breathe here. Noticing where we are as we're seated and noticing the breath, how it feels. Sitting, at first bringing awareness to the posture, noticing that our back is lengthened and reaching up through the neck and the top of the head. We can place our hands comfortably on the knees. And now, focusing more into the breath. Noticing how it's filling deep down and expanding the lungs, and exhaling all the way up and out. Let's take a few breaths here. Noticing the sit bones rooted into the ground, or if we're sitting on the ankles, feeling grounded. Extending up through the back. With each breath expanding deeply down. Another couple of breaths here. And then we'll move onto the hands and knees, into the cat-cow posture. Having our fingers spread wide here, noticing the sensation of our palms flat against the mat. Being aware of our fingers spread apart. Maybe we'll even notice some tension within the palm of the hand, where it's not really reaching the mat as much as the other hand. The knees below the hips, and we'll move through some warming movements in cat and cow, exhaling and rounding the back, and then inhaling and opening up. Move through this at your own pace. Inhaling deeply and exhaling fully. Crunching around the abdomen, raising the sit bones up, expanding through the chest, exhaling, tucking the hip bones in and rounding, exhaling. moving back and forth for a few more breaths. Noticing a warming of the body, maybe even a deepening of the breath. Pressing back into the child's pose, resting again on the ankles, extending the arms forward, reaching the forehead towards the ground. Taking a few breaths here. Let's look up towards the hands and step forward into standing, placing both feet in between the hands. And then raising up with hinging from the hips into standing. Our feet against the ground and our shoulders gently resting back and down, away from the ears. Noticing that we're relaxed, but having good posture while standing. Let's take a few breaths here. Feeling grounded down into the feet and raising up through the top of the head towards the sky. And we'll move through some forward folds, inhaling and raising the arms up towards the ears, beside the ears, and exhaling, releasing the arms and folding forward at the hips. Sweeping the hands towards the ground. Letting the head hang loosely and inhaling, raising up with a flat back and reaching up to the sky again. Bracing the core a bit and exhaling, releasing the arms down towards the ground as we fold. Inhaling, looking up, raising with a flat back. We'll move through this forward fold a few more times. With each forward fold, lengthening in the back of the neck, and then slowly rolling up or coming up with a flat back to standing. Inhaling, reaching up with the arms, and exhaling, finding our hands at our sides in standing posture. Taking a few more breaths here. And this time we'll move into a vinyasa, as we're moving into stepping back and lowering down towards the ground after each forward fold. Inhaling, raising the arms up, and exhaling, folding forward. Looking up, forward with a flat back, and exhaling, stepping back into a plank pose. Lowering down, we could be on our knees or have our knees off the ground. I'll lower my knees for this one, lowering down towards the ground. Inhaling, pressing into upward facing dog or a tiny cobra pose, just raising the chest and the head up away from the ground. Taking a breath here, exhaling and folding down, lowering down. Inhaling, we can actually press up into downward facing dog or back into child's pose. Inhaling, looking up towards the hands and stepping forward again in between the hands. And then raising up into standing. Inhaling, raising the arms up. Exhaling, folding forward. Inhaling, looking up forward as we're folded, and stepping back into plank again. Maybe lowering the knees and lowering the body down. Inhaling and looking up in Cobra or upward facing dog, and exhaling, pressing back into downward facing dog, or as an option into child's pose. Inhaling, looking up towards the hands, and then stepping both feet between the hands again. Looking up with a flat back forward, and exhaling, folding. We can raise up to standing. Let's take a few breaths here. This time I'll demonstrate the upward facing dog and the downward facing dog. From plank. Standing, feeling our spine kind of in a neutral position. Back extending and head reaching up towards the sky from the top of that crown of the head. Raising up, bracing the core, and exhaling, folding forward. Inhaling, looking up towards the front and stepping back, exhaling, lowering down from plank. Inhaling, moving into upward facing dog. And exhaling into downward facing dog. Of course, you can move with your own breath. Breathe however is comfortable in your practice. We'll stay here for a few breaths. Looking and stepping between the hands again. Inhaling with a flat back and exhaling, folding down. Inhaling and raising up to standing. Take a breath and we'll move to the other side, Vinyasa. Raising the hands up, bracing the core, exhaling, folding forward. Inhaling with a slight look forward, exhaling, stepping back and lowering down. Inhaling into upward facing dog. Feeling the palms spread apart on the mats, exhaling into downward facing dog. Stepping the feet between the hands again. Raising with a flat back and exhaling, folding forward. Inhaling, raising up into standing pose. We can do some standing postures. Let's move into a lunge on each side. Stepping back with one leg, keeping both feet parallel with each other, and bending the front knee. This is a basic lunge posture here. Feeling the strength in the leg muscles. We can put our hands together in front and take a few breaths here. From the lunge, we can move into a triangle pose, straightening both legs, moving the back foot a little bit out to the side. Whatever's comfortable, maybe 45 degrees out, and the front foot is facing forward more. We'll have a micro bend in the knee here, and we'll reach our lower arm towards that front ankle. Engaging the core and then twisting, looking up towards the sky as we're moving our hand downwards. Opening this hip, the top hip, back, and reaching up with the hand. And raising up to standing, that micro bend in the front knee. Let's step forward, both feet together. Let's put a little micro back bend before we move to the other side. Raising our arms up as we did in the fold. And then on the exhale, reaching back slightly with a slight bend in the upper back. And then exhaling, releasing your arms. Now, of course, there's going to be that curve in the lower back. We're also trying to open up the upper back a little bit on that back bend. Stepping back with the other leg into lunge. The back leg straight and the front knee is bent over the front ankle. Trying to get less of a curve in that lower back so it's not so hyper-lordotic, but more of a braced core. More engagement. Place the hands in the front for a few breaths, noticing where we are. Noticing the muscles activated. We'll move into triangle pose on the other side, extending both legs, bringing that rear foot out about 45 degrees, and then extending both knees, reaching the lower hand down towards the front ankle while twisting our torso up towards the sky, opening and engaging the core. Returning to standing and stepping both feet together towards the front of the mat. We'll move into another micro back bend here. Raising up, bracing that core, but focusing on opening up the upper back on the exhale. Let's take a few deep breaths here in standing pose before we move into towards the ground. We can find our way onto the ground any way we'd like, moving back into the plank and lowering, or even just squatting down and then rolling back onto the mat. That's another way to do it. Actually, I didn't put any balancing poses. So we can work on a little bit of arm balance while on the mat then. Coming forward onto the hands and knees again. And as an option, we can move into crow pose. Either putting both knees against the back of the triceps, or one at a time, lifting 1 foot at a time off the ground. So I have 1 foot lifted here, looking forward. I'll try the other foot lifted, looking forward. And definitely you could try both as well. Make sure you're looking up and forward for this posture, this balancing arm pose. Maybe a couple of those. And then moving back towards the mat. As we find ourselves seated, let's move it to one more forward fold while seated. Having that kind of a almost flat lower back, or moving towards having a flatter lower back, just so that we can engage those muscles and have some more length in the spine. You know, of course the back's not supposed to be flat, but we're trying to lengthen the spine in this case. Inhaling and raising our arms up, and exhaling, folding forward. Wherever the hands fall and meet the mat. Taking a few breaths here as we're folding forward towards the feet. We can imagine that the heart is moving towards the feet because we're still opening up the upper back and moving forward. Then releasing from that, we'll do a couple of seated twists here. We can bring one ankle towards the opposite sit bone and the other foot's against the top of the other knee. Lengthening up through the spine, and then wrapping the front arm around the knee and rotating away from the torso up towards the head. Focusing on extending the spine. Releasing after a couple more breaths. Finding yourselves in that the seated staff pose again. Let's do another forward fold here. Inhaling, raising the arms up, pressing our lower back forward, and exhaling, lowering our hands down, our chest moving towards the feet. And then we'll move into the twist on the other side, bringing that heel against the other sit bone and the other foot around the top of the other knee. Raising up, taking a breath down deep and twisting towards the other side. Even for right here, just breathing, we could feel some releasing and unwinding. All the way from the lower body up. Then when we're ready, release this twist. Take a final exhale and we'll move into resting pose. It's basically just lying on your back, but more body lengthened and extended, and more awareness sinking into the ground. So we'll roll and find ourselves moving towards the ground on the back. And I'll demonstrate here. But I'll guide while seated up here. Now you can remain resting on your back or come to a seated posture, whichever you prefer. Feeling the limbs extended, the wrists and the ankles sinking down into the ground. Releasing another breath, perhaps now breathing more, exhaling through your mouth. Just let everything release and remain here for a few minutes. Bringing awareness in the breath and the weight of the body into the mat. And returning some awareness into the body, to the hands and the feet, and the head. Then moving up towards a seated posture, if we're lying down. Finding ourselves seated, and again rooted down into the ground. Crown of our head extended up towards the sky. Taking a few deeper breaths. We'll end the practice. Namaste.